I'm pissed. So you probably already heard the news, but yeah, Sony in January of 2028 will be discontinuing physical game manufacturing. That back there is my stack of PS5 games on disc. That does not include PS4, PS3, PS2, PS1, Wii, Wii U, Switch, Switch 2, N64, 3DS, original Xbox, any of those. That's just my PlayStation 5 collection, a console notorious for literally not having games. I bring that up to say that I like collecting. I like physical media, and I love video games. Obviously, I did not buy all of these at full price. There was a lot of sales involved, a lot of bulk deals, a lot of pre-owned, all of that stuff. But every single one of those games has a story. Rise of the Ronin, for instance, I worked at Best Buy for a time, and you get a discount on games, but you need to be working there. And I was about to quit because it sucked, and I pre-ordered a bunch of stuff to get the discount. And I ended up playing Rise of the Ronin because I wanted to, get the discount on it. And did I love it? Not necessarily, but I always kind of hold this in fond memories because I got this on the same day as Dragon's Dogma 2, which I really liked, and Princess Peach Showtime, which is really bad. So this is just a fun thing for me to have. Whenever I see this on my shelf, I go, oh yeah, isn't that silly that I scammed the corporation that I worked for in order to have an okay time with a video game. This is a very important and I think highly underrated and basically ignored aspect of gaming, but also physical media in general. When you have a tangible thing, it holds memories and it's something that you can remember for life and be fond of, and all of this stuff that the human brain tells us to think. It is a powerful drug that the gaming industry has been using for decades now. This is how you make consumers that will continue to come back to support you through all the rough times, through all of that. People will come back because of the memories that they have with your art or with your product, whichever side you land on that part. That is why people are here. That's why they get so excited when you show them a new God of War. That's why they get so excited when Final Fantasy VII Remake is announced and it's been so long and people really want to play it and it takes 5 years to come out. It's all these stories, these memories, right? That we all kind of share together. The TLDR of this video is that the switch away from physical is such a short-sighted decision that I think will end up biting them in the ass in the very, very long run. There are monumental consequences to a publisher literally not allowing the manufacturing of discs anymore. It's not just one studio saying we're not going to do it. It's just that they aren't going to exist. And that is a really, really big problem on a multitude of levels. So yeah, I'm going to talk about why I'm just so frustrated right now. I'm going to talk about a lot of points about why Sony may have made this decision and why I think it's a bad one for everyone. Even if you don't buy physical, there are consequences that are going to ripple across the industry. And I think that these are concerning times. I really do think that there is going to be what they're going to call a bust. The games industry is tech, and tech works on booming and busting. You have periods of really big profitability and everybody wants your product, and then you just peter out and you fire a lot of people until it happens again where you have a really big upswing, right? It's a really volatile industry, and that is kind of the point, right? Like the only thing that's certain is that sometimes you're going to do really, really well, and other times it's going to be really bad. And I fear that this might be a bust that is unrecoverable, at least to bring us back to the way that we traditionally see things. So first, let me get this out of the way. Sony are 100% at fault here. We really do need to keep them liable. This is not a decision that is impacted or greenlit because of anything else. GTA 6 did not factor into this decision. This has been something that has been going on for a very, very long time. There is no world where days after GTA 6 announces it has no physical edition, Sony goes, actually, what if we didn't do them ever again? That is extremely silly to make that conclusion. This has been going on for a very, very long time, and Sony have deliberated this decision for years. What that isn't to say, though, is that lining up this announcement so close to the GTA 6 controversy and just before Xbox is about to hit their big reset button and close potentially a bunch of studios that are near and dear to the gaming public's heart, it does seem like they are really trying to slip this under the radar and kind of excuse them and be like, everybody's in the shitter right now, and look, we're just following the trend that somebody else did, but like, look at these guys who are about to like lay off a bunch of people that you like. We're really not so bad here. Most of you buy digital anyways. This is an extremely strategic time to announce this, and we cannot get caught up in all the fluff. Obviously, we can talk about why it's bad that GTA 6 is going all digital so soon. Obviously, we can talk about why it's bad that Microsoft might be shutting down Double Fine and Ninja Theory and all these other studios, right? But right now, we have to look at Sony, and we have to look at Sony as the sole proprietor of this. They are the console manufacturer. Do not look at Rockstar. Do not look at Microsoft. Look at Sony. So first off, I want to talk about the concept of boycotting in the video game industry, because I feel like this is something that's really easy to talk about as a good. You just say, let's boycott, and that feels morally right, and it feels like it has the impact that you think it is. But let's talk about why I feel like just saying let's boycott or not buying stuff is not as effective as you think it might be. What I'm not saying is that you should bootlick for these companies or just buy things to buy things. If you want to boycott, if you feel like that is the best possible option, if you feel like you don't want to buy from Sony anymore, that is totally valid. Obviously, you don't have to give them your money. You're not obligated to. But there's something that always kind of bugs me, because whenever we talk about this, you always hear the term vote with your wallet. It's the concept that not spending money is basically a vote to say like, hey, I don't want this. I think, unfortunately, that idea is just not quite correct. When you go to vote, when we use the actual metaphor of voting, like the real world voting, your vote counts when you cast one, and it counts for who you cast it on, right? It's not about not voting, right? You don't get a lot of data from not doing something, but you do get a lot of data when you go out of your way to say, I want this. I want to vote for this, right? Voting with your wallet, in my mind, is really more about how you spend your money when you spend it, where you spend it, what you spend it on, right? So whenever I spend most of my money, and I spend a lot of money on video games, as you can see, most of that is really retro and it's resale, but when I do buy new, it's always physical. And if it isn't physical, it's because there isn't a physical option, and mostly that's just because it's an indie game, and obviously there are different, circumstances for why indie games are digital first, right? So the sentiment of saying let's boycott Sony because we don't like this is really tough, because what I want to show them is that I want physical games. It's not that I want to show them that I'm not going to give them any money anymore, because if that's what I show them, then they're not going to care, right? I'm just a lost cause. What I want to show them is that I want to give you money for a full product. I want to experience the art in the way that it's intended to be experienced, with the ownership that I have of it. That's why I have all of these things. And this is where I'm torn, because if I want to vote with my wallet, I have to then go buy a bunch of physical Sony games. And I don't want to give them money right now. You know what I mean? They're kind of bringing in the end times. And what am I going to do? I'm just going to line their pockets, right? I could go through a retailer who doesn't actually get any of that money, but I buy stuff from the retailer and then they run out of stocks and the retailer buys from Sony, and it's basically the same thing. So it's such a hard conundrum, I think, because I want to ride that sentiment, but I don't think without like strongly worded, like backed up evidence, like something like this, ideally, that the point that I want comes across. And to be fair, it doesn't always come across when the money is spent. When a really small like horror movie does really well at the box office, a lot of times the wrong lesson is learned. And it's like, oh, people want more of that movie, and like, let's franchise it, let's make a sequel, and let's make the next one bigger. And it's like, no, people want good movies that are interesting and cost less. That is where the success is. You can misinterpret the vote, right, and get the completely wrong answer. So basically, I understand the sentiment, but there needs to be more, right? It's not just about spending or not spending money. It needs to be about sending a concrete message and saying like, this is why it's bad, and this is why it's bad for everybody. That's kind of the thesis of this video. Physical going away is the death of the industry. It is a objectively bad thing for everybody. Let's talk about one of the more like economic reasons why the physical market is so important. And it's because there is not only a consistency of value that companies get from games, but there's also no price regulation when there's no market to determine it. So one, let's talk about how video games make money. So nowadays, more so and more so, the idea of making money and good bets economically are ones that you can continue to make money forever and will continue to grow. That's why subscription services are so popular. That's why industries with physical things, but if they have to be like replaced every so often, you get customers for life, right? Because they have to keep going, right? Can you imagine a dystopian world where like we don't need to buy groceries all the time and then grocery stores start going away, right? That kind of thing. So there is something like that in the video game industry. The physical sale will always make sure that they're getting some sort of money off of any game that they make. Retailers have to buy copies from the manufacturer and from the publishers, right? So whenever retailers are like, hey, we want X amount of copies for the entire nation, that's just guaranteed money that's going right to them. And then from there, if like they sell out or if they're selling a lot, the retailer will order more and then they'll send out more, they will sell more, etc., etc., right? That's how you get that consistent money. So even if you have like a flop on your hands, a game that doesn't sell very well, you can potentially make another one or make a different game with the money that you made from that first one, right? It was a lot healthier of a model where there wasn't as much risk involved. But now, the further and further we go into digital, every single game is now individually expected to do gangbusters, to do numbers, to be completely profitable, right? If there's no middleman manufacturer, yes, the potential profit through digital is higher, right? It's basically, if you're like the publisher and developer of the game, it's like 100%, right? You get all the revenue. Let's say your game costs a lot of money. I'm going to say 350 million, okay? What that means is that you probably need to sell about like 5 million copies to just break even, right? And that's all like pure revenue, right? You have to sell 5 million copies to break even. One, it's just like crazy that a budget can balloon that high, right? But let's take that out of the equation. If you were to have sold 1 million units to retailers, right, across the country, across the world, you are at least guaranteed that you have, however much, like however million, like let's say you got 50 million out of like manufacturing costs, like taken out, right? Okay. You at least got 50 million back, and like, it's not a great start, but 50 million isn't nothing. But let's say you're somebody like Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, where you probably had a budget similar to that, and you sold way less, and you did not sell nearly as many physical copies to retailers because it came out like 2 years ago, right? Now you have a monumental flop on your hand and something that could totally close a studio. Whereas if you're in the NES days and you make a game and you really don't sell very well, but you're like, okay, you still have enough to kind of scrounge up the money to make a sequel that might be better. People have probably played the first one. They're telling their friends like, hey, this next one's coming out. Like, here, I'll let you borrow my first one so you can try the new one, right? And then they feel more inclined to buy that one, right? That's kind of the cycle of like the old gaming model that just isn't here. And if you get rid of physical altogether, you have completely removed the safety net. And now it's a lot harder to justify projects that are more out there, or, sometimes even like, I don't understand how all these big budget games are being greenlit when the risks are so much higher nowadays. Having smaller budgets, I feel like makes a lot more sense because you don't have to sell nearly as many copies to not only break even, but then make a profit, right? So here's the next piece of that puzzle. That's where sales come into play, right? Well, it's not selling super well at this price, or it's been out for a long time and the sales have declined. Let's drop the price a little bit. Maybe we'll put it as a limited time so more people get in, whatever. We're not making as much money, but we're getting more people in on it, right? Well, there's two factors here. A physical sale through a retailer is a retailer saying, I want to move more of this product. And it's something that doesn't really affect how many units were sold on the manufacturer or the developer side, right? But if it's digital, the price is determined by the publisher and the manufacturer, right? Or excuse me, just the publisher. So there's not as much of an incentive to have a competitive price, especially on like a Sony platform. If it's a Sony game that's only available on a Sony platform, the fact that there's a sale in the first place is a miracle, right? Because they're not competing with anybody. There's no retailer here that can like undercut them and be like, hey, we're actually selling this for cheaper and you're not seeing any of that money, right? So there's like an anti-competitiveness to it where you kind of like can't find a good deal. And when you can't find a good deal, in theory, Sony gets more money, but the consumer has to like pay for that, right? They are taking on the extra cost because games are generally going to be more expensive because there's just no competition, right? That's the problem. All digital removes the competition of the industry. Retailers work well with the manufacturers, but at the end of the day, they are competing with them. And they've been losing the battle, but at least they're still there, right? Like, look how many of these games that I bought from a retailer or from somebody else who's selling it cheaper that they didn't see any of the profit from. That's why they want to get rid of this, right? They want to get rid of me. Even though I give them money all the time, even though I buy new stuff all the time, Soros should be right there, right? Like I just bought Soros for full price from them. They don't care. They don't care because all this money that I could be spending is not 100% going to Sony. And they have a big problem with that. So they don't care that I really do want to support the stuff that they're currently doing, the products that they currently make. I'm supporting the wrong products to them. Also, something I want to bring up is the supply and demand, right? We all know regular supply and demand. As supply goes up and demand goes lower, the price has got to go down to try to get people to go. If there's low supply and high demand, the price will go high, right? What happens if there's an infinite supply? And that's where the really big problem is here. Basically, the reason why everything is going to be so expensive is that there is no market that is determining the price, right? There's an infinite supply. So there's no need to base the price off of the supply anymore. It's only ever going to be about the demand. And if the demand is high, the price is going to go high too. It fundamentally shifts the economics of this industry to a point where it's going to just, again, all get offloaded onto the consumer. If you ever show them that you want something that they have, they will not stop at nothing to make sure you pay the maximum price for it. And when prices get higher, you start having projects that are a lot safer. The bets are safer, more people are going to buy them. If prices don't lower or aren't lower overall for some products, then the amount that people are going to take a risk on something is just so much lower. You're never going to experience a new franchise. No one's ever going to give you their disc to have you try it for free to make a consumer for life, right? You just have to guess. And if you guess wrong, you feel bad because you can't get a refund on a lot of these stores. And then you're just like probably not going to buy something from them again. Again, it's that short-sightedness, right? Where you need people in and trying stuff. This is why at grocery stores, they have somebody who's like, hey, try this product, right? So you eat it and go, that was great. I'm going to go buy some. I don't have to take a risk on this thing. I know I'm going to like it. That's why it's so important to have good sales and to have competition and to have lower prices so that when people try it and like it, they're more willing to spend their money on something that they feel like is worthwhile. The price is not the problem. It's the value proposition and it's the respect to the consumer that is always why people are here. Also, with physical, if you buy a physical game, let's say, Uncharted, this was like $50. Let's say I try Uncharted 4, I play like 2 hours of it. I'm like, I'm not feeling it. Am I going to get all of my money back? No. But I can go to GameStop like right away and probably get a decent amount of like store credit that, because it's a new game and I'm trading it towards something. Or I can just go to somebody who wanted this and be like, bro, I didn't even use this. Do you want like $10 off? And they're like, hell yeah, of course, why not? Right? There's less of a risk on the consumer yet again, because you always have something that you can give to somebody else. So you can get money back for, or you can just be a good person and be like, here you go. Like, I don't really want this anymore. And then it just makes so much more sense, doesn't it? It's always the burden on the consumer. The consumer takes on the extra price. The consumer takes on the extra risk. And Sony and the big publishers, they just kind of bask in their higher percentage yield of revenue. There's so much that comes with the physical disc that is lost. You're losing the usability and the functionality of a physical disc. There is so much that the physical version provides, literally just from an economic standpoint, but from a value proposition standpoint as the consumer, that is gone when there are none of them. So your game is now a lesser product that, in my opinion, is literally worth less money that you are now charging proportionately more for. But unfortunately, here's where I have to pivot and talk about one of the biggest issues that we all kind of understand is here, but I feel like we turn a blind eye to. Me, this kind of gamer, the one that just buys a bunch of stuff and plays a bunch of stuff and takes risks and doesn't mind if they don't like a game and they'll play all the way through it. They just like having the experience, right? The one that spends a whole lot of money more often, we're the minority. I am the minority in this industry now. Not only is it like 20% maybe of all game sales being physical, those sales are proportionally less money going back to the people who make them. So I am in a smaller group of consumers and I'm one that makes them less money. Why would Sony focus on me? Why would they try to appeal to me, right? Why would they not appeal to the guy that buys 3 games a year? That's COD, FIFA, and then one other, the big game of the year. This year it'll be the guy that buys GTA 6. They only spend their money in a handful of places, and they want to have a cut of that pie. There's so many of them that do that, and they know that it's incredibly lucrative to make sure that they get those consumers, right? Rockstar knows they've got them in the bag this year, so they can do whatever they want, right? But in other years, Sony is trying to get that guy to buy Spider-Man. It's the kind of guy where you go on Facebook Marketplace and you see them selling all their games, and it's like FIFA, COD, FIFA, Madden, NBA, and then like you see Spider-Man 2, and they're like, oh yeah, real video game alert. Oh, back to like NASCAR, whatever, like anything like that, right? That's who they want to sell to. That's who they are trying to get. These people also don't care about all of this extra stuff. They care for the easiest way that they can get the game and play with their friends and maybe not even play it very much. It's always digital. It's always going directly through the PlayStation store, and it's always just going to spend the money. They may begroan and be like, I have to spend $80 on GTA 6. Oh, well, They don't care. They're just gonna play those games no matter what. Unfortunately, it's all entertainment industries that will go after the casual. That's why there's so many blockbusters, because you're always going like, how did the Lilo and Stitch remake make $1 billion? It's because there's always someone who goes to the movie theater 3 times a year and they're like, well, I like Lilo and Stitch, and movie theaters are so expensive nowadays. I might as well go see a movie that I already know I'm gonna like. That is who they're going for. That is consistent, sustainable money. That is the name of the game nowadays. They don't care about longevity, about making people who are going to spend money forever. They just care about getting the money now and making sure that they can keep getting the money in the short term. It looks good for their investors. And again, this is the way to make the stable income, to focus on these people and these games, because again, they do not have the backbone of retail sales to get them through, right? They really need to focus on these surefire bets. I'm someone who will make a stink, and I will not buy a game that is just digital. I will not buy something that I feel like is not of good value. I will go through other people. I will go through somebody reselling it, right, at a cheaper price. That's where a lot of these games come. That's where a lot of my Switch game key cards come from. They don't come directly from the publisher. I give somebody who already got them, or I get them on sale so that I know that the retailer is probably not making a big profit on it. They're just trying to get rid of it. But you may kind of be thinking to yourself, why is this now a problem, right? Like, why is physical a problem? They've been doing this physical and digital split for a second, and Blu-rays and stuff are cheap as hell to make. Like, it really shouldn't be that much of an issue for Sony, especially if people buy them. Like, I buy them, plenty of people buy them. How is this a problem now? So let's talk about the AI problem. The world's complete, like, head over heels snake oil falling in love with the AI model and chasing it so much and putting so much into tech, and RAM prices going up and storage prices going up, have continued to take a hit on the industry, where it is now no longer feasible to be selling consoles as these loss leader products that are actually losing the money that they will make up on software. It literally makes no sense anymore, because they are losing so much money that it is not even possible to make up on the software anymore, especially when Sony is mismanaging where they're putting their money and barely putting out any AAA first-party products in the first place. So what is the solution? Well, 1, make your consoles more expensive, which they've already done. 2, lower your manufacturing costs as much as humanly possible, which they've already done. Fire a whole bunch of people and lay off studios as a whole, which of course they've already done. And now, how about you just make those boxes not have as many features? Well, what about that disk drive that Sony apparently thinks costs $100 to put into every single PlayStation? That's a hell of a lot of parts cost that you can cut down on, right? But that's not enough. We need to make sure that we get as much money as possible. So we need to eliminate the people who buy stuff secondhand. If they said, hey, I want to play this game, well, we need to make sure that we see every single cent of that money, because we need to get all these software sales to make up for the hardware that is just not selling very well anymore, because it's literally so super duper expensive. And so not only does this kill the traditional like resale and like secondhand market, this is also going to take a really big toll on the retro gaming market as well, because people are going to be fed up with this, and people are going to be like, hey, I want to play these older games, but you're giving me no option. I can't even put it into my console. You know what? Like, these consoles are so expensive. I got to sell my PS5 so that I can even get a PS6, but now I can't even play a bunch of the games I've been playing from my PS4, right? So now people are going, well, I should probably just buy a PS4. Like, these have got to be super cheap at this point. But at that point, I have a feeling that the retro market is going to boom up, because the supply will never ever get any greater. In fact, supply will only continue to shrink in the retro market, while demand is going to go up dramatically. So while Sony gets to ignore the supply and demand of their market, they are skewing the supply and demand market of some of their biggest competition nowadays, as people really don't want to go towards this digital future. Yes, there are people who just do not care, but more and more people are getting more into collecting these things and having them. It just makes a lot more sense. They want to have something that they can hold on to, especially people who are younger, even younger than me. They're kind of pining for this age that they never had, where they don't have to be digital anymore. And then here is the big thing. If that market becomes super expensive, and the market regularly becomes super expensive, if all gaming is super expensive, the bet here is that a lot of people will go, why would I spend so much money on one game that is super duper old when I could spend that same amount of money on one game that literally just came out? And I'll tell you this, Sony is allowed to adjust that price to whatever they feel like. However, the retro market cannot. So if the retro market is a problem, then they just lower the prices so that retro games look really, really expensive compared to theirs. If it isn't a problem, they don't touch it. They have all of the control here. Finally, this is my last point that I've gotten down, but it's the thing that you've heard a lot. Companies don't want you to own anything. There is a control freak personality here. They can give you things when they want, they can take them away whenever, and then they can kind of create this oh, well, this hasn't been available for a long time, so it's going to be really, really hype when it is. You're the person that created the problem. You're the one who made it so scarce, so hard to get into this stuff. And now you're trying to be like, look at us. We are so gracious for bringing back these old games, for lowering prices, for doing all of this stuff. It's a charade. It's trying to play the bad guy now to feign as the good guy later. And of course, that's going to feed into those surefire bets and easy money. We're going to get more remakes, more re-releases, more remasters, all of that stuff. That is going to continue. I think gaming as a whole is kind of going to start going into the Ouroboros, right? Where it's going to start eating itself. We're going to stop making new things as we continue to recycle what we've already been doing. There is less of a future. Games are getting too expensive. How are we going to cut costs while keeping profits as high as possible? We're not going to take a risk on a smaller game that has little budget. We're going to use that same budget to remake a game we know people love, and then we're going to make the same profit as if we spent $350 million, except this time we only spent about $30 million. That is what they're trying to do. At least I think. And this is where I'm going to stop. This is where I'm going to cut myself off, because there's so much more I could talk about. There's so much more stuff that's making me feel very anxious. But this is conjecture, isn't this? I'm giving you possible outcomes, right? I could be completely wrong. This could not do any of that stuff. And it might just be well, this sucks, right? I'm just not going to get a PlayStation 6. I guess it sucks, right? But I really do think that this is going to have monumental effects over the whole industry. And there are going to be some people like Nintendo who try to hold out, but I guarantee you some publishers want their games to be physical, and they know that their audience wants them to be physical. But Sony is saying no. Sony is saying, we don't make those. You can't have that. There's no other way to do it, right? It's not like a Blu-ray player where if people wanted to go back and listen to a bunch of Blu-rays or vinyl, it's easy enough to make a DVD player as a third party. It's easy enough to make a record player as a third company. It's literally impossible to make a PlayStation. And if you wanted to emulate the games, how are you going to get the ROMs, right? It's getting harder and harder to preserve games, to play them without going through every specific thing that the publishers want you to. This is just another gigantic step. So this sucks. This really sucks. And I don't think they'll back down, as much as I want to hope that people will make a stink and that they'll continue to make them, or at least make them in a limited quantity so that there are at least collector's editions, or they're preserved for, museums. What am I thinking that the world would actually think about trying to preserve what we have now, to make sure that these things are not lost and all this effort and art is just not thrown away because of corporate greed, right? It's really easy to use the word corporate greed. I was watching that Jason Schreier video where he talks about this, where it's a little hard to really pin down what that means and who is at fault. Really, the fact that this call has been made is bringing in the end times, right? This is going to be a domino effect where more and more are going to pull out. You're going to see a lot more digital only games going forward before this even happens. And a lot of publishers and bigger companies are going to start getting on board with this way more. You know, they might think that they want to have their box product in the store, and then they're going to see one game do really, really well, digital only for them, and they're going to just give up on that and go, yep, this is the way. So the challenge is we have to resist this, right? I think I'm done. I think I will buy physical products. I will buy Wolverine, right? I will buy that because they've said this will be on disc. I will buy that because you have given me what I want. The second that a PlayStation 6 does not have a disc drive, the second that GTA 6 decides not to have a disc in there, I'm out. Sorry. If I'm going to buy your thing, you don't see any of my money from here on out, right? And is that going to actually do much? I don't know. But I would hope that the most loyal fans that they see backing out and then realizing that they aren't making fans for life anymore. Sony doesn't do a lot of kid stuff. Xbox doesn't do a lot of kid stuff. The reason why I'm a fan of Nintendo and Sony is that when I was a kid, I had the experiences and the consoles and the games, right? If a kid cannot have those experiences and it's like basically not built for them, how are they going to become somebody like me? Somebody who will stick with them through thick and thin until we've really been like wronged. And I think we've super been wronged. And I think gamers are entitled for a lot of things. This is not one of them. This is just, I buy a product, I expect to get the product. I don't expect to get a license. I don't expect for it to be taken away from me. I don't expect for you to never ever try to put it on sale. I expect you to want me to play it, you know? I expect you to fight for me to play it, not the other way around. I don't know what the future actually holds, and I don't know if Nintendo will continue to try to push physical, and maybe they'll back down on their key card bullshit and will be at least having a shining hope there. But something gives me a feeling that within the next year and a half, I will stop playing new releases for a while. And that sucks. I love playing new things. I like playing games I don't like. I like trying new stuff and keeping up with what people are thinking and keeping up with this industry. That's really fun to me. But I'm more and more starting to run into the fact where I can't justify it anymore. And it sucks. This sucks. This fucking sucks. This sucks. Well, I guess just if you want to stick around this channel, I'll hopefully be talking about games for a while. I would like to talk about new ones, but who knows? Maybe in the future, I'll just stick to the old stuff and I'll just stick to my library. So yeah, if you're new here, subscribe and like, and tell me what you think down in the comments, because I know I'm not as super like gung-ho blinded by like the let's just boycott and things will be fine and dandy. I do want to take a more realistic approach, but I think it also made me take the cynical approach. And I don't have any evidence to support that not being the case, so maybe you have at least some silver linings for me, and I'd appreciate that too. Sorry, everyone. Have a good day. Peace out.